All right, hello, folks. Welcome back to On This Hill.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
It's afternoon where we are right now.
It is, yeah.
Not sure where you are listening, but it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's funny. By Tuesday, this is when we recorded on Tuesday, we've already done a fair amount because we've got Sunday and all of our Sunday services. And then Monday, we've got some meetings, and we have our ministry apprenticeship program.
Yeah.
So sometimes it feels later in the week by Tuesday than it actually
Tuesday
is.
does feel like Thursday.
It does, yes. Yeah. Yeah, this Sunday we had 9 people baptized across both of our campuses.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
Bunch of people jumped in at the last minute.
Yeah. Jumped in
the
at the last
plunge.
minute. Yeah. We had 4 come kind of last minute, sort of gave a call and said, hey, if you are recently saved or would like to be saved today and would like to take the step of obedience. So that takes a little conversation with them and finding out, just make sure that they understand what we mean when we talk about being born again and why we get baptized. But
Yeah.
it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I was at the end of the service, and they came to attend a church service and ended up going home wet.
Yeah. We try to keep some sweatpants on hand for those occasions. So we give people a T-shirt and some sweatpants to go home in,
Right.
just in case.
So we try to lower the bar a little bit.
Yeah,
Why
try
you
to.
can't do this
Yeah.
in a good way.
Yeah. They don't always even know that we've got dry clothes for them, but we tend to try to have some dry clothes for them just in case afterwards. And
Yeah.
you know what's funny to me is some people that do that last minute and come in, they're like, yeah, I'm gonna get saved, I want to get baptized. We don't have socks for them, and I baptized several people with socks on, and I thought, you should take your socks off. You don't
Maybe
want
they don't think of it in the
you
moment.
don't want wet socks. Yeah, I'm sure they're just not thinking about it. They're thinking, I want to get
They
baptized.
take their cell phone out of the pocket.
They
but
do,
They don't remember
but
the socks.
I often think you should go ahead and pop them socks off, man. You want to walk home in wet socks. That's not what baptism is all about.
It's not,
Whether or not
but
your
it
socks
certainly
get
is
wet.
part of it.
Well, it is part of it, yeah.
I wonder if Jesus dealt with that at the River Jordan. Hey, you
Wet
guys,
socks.
take your socks off.
I don't know that they had socks. I think they were a sandal culture, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Open-toed.
So like I said, a couple things going on this weekend. Obviously, our Sunday services. And this Sunday, we were talking about, we've kind of lingered on that story of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And so this was sort of brings an end to that conversation. Not that they are out of the picture anymore, but that being in the center of the story was at the end on this Sunday when we saw the party.
Yeah, the after party after the resurrection of Lazarus.
What do you do after you raise someone from the dead?
Yeah, what do you serve at that kind of a party?
Yeah.
You'd think you'd have special food.
Yeah, like, hey guys, what do we want to do? Let's go to Dairy Queen.
Come on over. Lazarus is back.
Yeah, Lazarus. Wait. I just went to a party where we buried him.
Yeah. That'd be quite the spectacle, wouldn't it? You'd think that
Yeah.
a lot of people, and in that culture,
Wow.
it was very cultural for just people to drop in, to the party, the whole neighborhood. And so
Yeah.
there were people, if you could have had selfies taken with Lazarus,
Yeah.
that would have been happening. You can imagine taking that story and spinning it into today's context, what that would be like, whether it's an after party or a late night show or something like that, where you want to interview this guy.
I got to do one of the coolest things I've ever got to do on my last trip. I went to Turkey and we worked with people there. We're doing work there. I'll leave the details out of it. But while we were there, I got to attend a wedding of a Turkish guy.
Yeah.
And I could not believe what they did. I mean, it was unreal. It went on for days.
You're right.
And it starts with food. And they set up, I mean, we're not talking about in some little village. We're talking about a decent-sized town. They set out rows of tables in an alleyway, and anyone who walks by
Can join
can stop and eat. Matter of fact, you're like, that's what you do. You stop and eat at a wedding. Whose wedding is this that I'm eating at? And you're just eating their food.
Yeah.
And they will just feed and feed and feed
Isn't that
anyone
wild,
who
huh?
comes.
Yeah. That's very different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got a daughter who's getting ready to get married, and we're like, oh, how many people can we afford to feed? How many people can you invite? Because there's a limit. I have limited resources. I can only feed so many people. So what am I going to feed them? And, of course, they had food that you could stretch. They had soups and breads and stuff.
Yeah.
But everybody got something.
And it's about being together. It's
Yeah.
not so much about a manicured meal. It's just about being together, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's pretty cool in a way.
Yep.
A lot of the countries in the world, a lot of places are like that. I mean, they're
Yeah.
just community is the main thing, and
Hmm.
we don't care whether we had soup or sandwiches. We just want to be
Be
together.
together, yeah.
So,
That's they're doing. They were being together and being together to celebrate Lazarus's return.
and I would put a party on if Lazarus was my brother. That'd be a fun celebration.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think if I've ever had anything close to that. I haven't. Maybe
Mm.
I've seen people they got out of prison.
Yeah,
Like,
or
hey, it's a
got out of
party.
the hospital or
Yeah.
something. But
Your uncle's back from prison.
yeah, yeah.
You don't have uncles like that, I'm sure.
No, not in my line.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting the conversations. Well, John gives us some idea, right? Doesn't he? There in John 12 about how the party was a little divided. Some people were super excited and awestruck and celebrating, and then other people were murmuring, like, "Look at that! The whole world's gone after him."
Yeah.
The religious folks who just had this axe to grind with Jesus
Yeah.
could see their power just slipping away right
Yeah.
in front of their eyes. Can you imagine the jealousy and the
Yeah.
envy that must have been there as they watch this? They drop into the party and everybody's, so to speak, clapping Jesus on the back, Lazarus on the back, and they realize, they're going with them. They're not staying
Yeah.
with us. It's terrible.
It is. I think we've kind of described that a few times because it's come up over and over again as Jesus does miracles, that it makes Pharisees mad because it's on a Sabbath or because people are just paying attention to
Yeah.
him, not to them. But another thing that is said in this instance and right around this time is if we don't do something about this,
Yeah.
he can't be proclaiming himself to be a king or other people proclaiming him to be a king, or else Rome is going to take our nation away from us.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about that in the pulpit, but I do think that's interesting because I don't think they're wrong. I mean, I get
Yeah.
their reasoning, and maybe I
Sure.
should say, where jealousy, you could be like, oh, these are just bad people. They're just selfish, bad people. But that piece, there was a political element that Rome, you don't get to be king unless Rome says,
no competition.
you're the king and we put you there and we really run things. You don't get to compete with Rome. And it seems like a legitimate fear, like if we let this go and he leads some kind of rebellion and proclaims himself to be the king of Israel, then Rome's boot heel is going to come down on us.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting? It's an ulterior angle, right? Like, or motive. The self-preservation. And there was no question, there was a ton of politics among the Jews at that
Yeah.
time. There were the Zealots and these other groups who wanted to see the Jewish kingdom restored and Rome overthrown. And so they were dancing with that line of at what point are we going to trigger a crackdown, so to speak?
Because there had been crackdowns before. It's not like it never happened. There'd been other upstart messiahs who claimed that they were going to overthrow Rome and restore Israel to its rightful place as a kingdom, and that had never worked out before. But Jesus was describing a kingdom so completely different that even though they were hearing it, it's like they couldn't wrap their head around, like, this is a different kind.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting how the gospel plays into and plays out on the same stage as politics, as world politics, right? Like right now in our world, you see that same thing happening. You see China maybe is a good example. You see a nation that's being oppressed or suppressed and crackdowns, or Iran is another good example. And yet on the other part of the stage, you see the gospel showing up in different places, home churches expanding, people pledging allegiance to the king of the universe as opposed to the current prime minister, whatever. And so the gospel plays out at the same time. It's just wild. It reminds me of the parable of the wheat and the tares.
Yeah, and both you and I have worked in places, long-term or short-term, where the politics and the gospel were at odds with one another.
Right, there's tension.
Yeah, and there would be, crackdowns, or it was just illegal to have a church or to be Christian.
Or take someone else's glory.
Yeah, exactly. And I always, I lived in China for a while. The history of China and Christianity is complex and it changes often. While I was there, one of the rules that they made was you could not gather in groups larger than 12. That was just a rule. You could not gather in groups larger than 12. And that was their way of trying to, well, you also just couldn't start a house church. If it was called a house church, it had to stop. There were government-run churches.
Right.
That, the sermons went through the government before they got to the people, and they got to say what God said there or not. And I'd say that sometimes the gospel was preached in those, and sometimes it wasn't, because they like to take out things like the resurrection. But I thought that was so interesting when they came down with that rule of you can't gather in groups. I thought, how interesting. You don't want us to gather in groups larger than 12. It's an interesting number to pick.
Yeah, where'd you get the
Yeah,
number?
and are you unaware that the underground church is in the millions in your country right now, and it is in these small groups
Yeah,
that like
that
it is
you
spreading
you
this way.
almost helped create.
Yeah, yeah, you've
Yeah,
made cell churches. Yeah,
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 yeah. We saw the same thing in working in Latin America, where people who had power, it's all about power, isn't it?
uh-huh.
I mean, the gospel is all about power, the power to be transformed, the power over sin, the
Mhm.
power over darkness. And so, and God is the source of all power. We believe that. But if you're not a believer uh, in the kingdom of God or in Christ, you're still going to deal with power. And so we
Yeah.
would see things like even the most insignificant person who maybe is handing you paper towels, at a bathroom, they have power.
Hmm.
They're going to let you know, no, you can't leave until you pay this, or
Hmm.
someone going through a line, and government officials knew that they had a measure of power, and if that power felt
Yeah.
threatened, they would either, they'd shut you down or
Hmm.
hold you up to some degree. And it was a fascinating thing to watch, just
Yeah.
the struggle for power. And that's nothing new. I think it's thousands of years
And
old.
how often that kind of power, because Jesus was obviously the most powerful being in the world,
Right.
but he used his power so differently
Yeah.
than Rome. But that kind of power, we call it the Rome kind of power, how how often it leads to corruption. Like it
Yeah.
just that kind of power just seems to always lead to
Yeah.
some sort of
Yeah.
abuse of power.
Yeah.
Like it's
Because power is powerful. I mean, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Power
yeah,
is potentially,
yeah,
it's, it's like handling radioactive material. You got to be careful with it.
yeah.
And but it's interesting, in the Old Testament, God shows up in power in Moses, and he confronts the power of the day, which is Egypt,
Hmm.
and says, I'm going to start slow here, let my people go, and then it just builds and builds and builds
Yeah,
until the showdown happens.
yeah.
And but in the Gospels, yeah, you see that Jesus didn't come creating a showdown between Rome and Israel. He created a showdown between light and darkness.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that we're kind of stepping into what'll be up this Sunday, because right after this is when it has come to a head, and we're in the 6 days up to Passover, and the Jews have decided we've got to kill him, and maybe we ought to kill Lazarus too. And
Yeah.
and Jesus starts to proclaim very clearly the cross, and he states here in this chapter, before chapter 12 is over, he states, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it
Mhm.
remains alone. But if it does do that, it'll bear fruit. And he's describing the cross in a way that doesn't make sense. So it's funny, I think, how Hollywood steals from the gospel, because the gospel's the greatest story
Right.
ever.
Yeah.
I think it's Obi-Wan Kenobi that says in Star Wars, like, strike me down and I'll become more powerful than you can ever imagine, or something like that.
Sure.
And that's this weird mystical, nonsense. But that is true of Jesus. He's like, oh, the thing that you mean to stop me is actually what's going to multiply
Yeah.
this into my followers.
And the enduring power of the gospel, the enduring uh, message and practice, because in 2,000 years ago, in the context of John chapter 12 and 13, Rome was ruling, the
Hmm.
Jews were trying to get their kingdom back, nations were, but all those nations are gone. All those power structures, they're in the dustbin of history.
Yeah.
And yet the gospel continues to multiply throughout the
Hmm.
earth. It continues to grow. It's just,
Yeah.
and that seed that fell into the ground there
Yeah.
was more than just some metaphorical idea.
And think about what has endured. Like, what hasn't endured over that time are those nations.
Yeah,
Yeah, those nations are
they're
gone.
gone.
What has endured is the church and Mary's act of worship. And he said, like, what she's doing right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
this will be spoken about anywhere the gospel is
Mm.
shared. And that act of worship it still exists. That has been multiplied into so many people's lives. And that's what the church is. It's this worshiping body of transformed, born again people
Yeah.
who now just
Mm.
recreate those moments of, oh, I need to pour. He has poured himself out for me as a drink offering. He has planted himself into the earth for me to be born again.
Mm.
I'm going to pour my treasure out on
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And somehow she got that. She saw somehow in all of the stories and the
Mm.
time that she had with Jesus between his teachings, his miracles, her brother returning to her from the dead, it's like it clicked, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you are worthy of it all.
Yeah. 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 I just can't help but think about the evidence of the power is in a transformed life. The light shined in the darkness, John said, and the darkness has not overcome it. So not only did Jesus overcome darkness, but then the followers, the people that believed in his name, believed in his work, and sort of latched on to that, accepted that. They are given power over sin and a broken life and all the things that destroy us. Because we always say all the time, people hear us say we don't live in a neutral universe. And so there's different things that sort of compete to have that power, to compete for authority in our lives. And man, the gospel just sets you free from all the things that compete for that attention.
Yeah. And this, connected to this Monday, we had our ministry apprenticeship program, and Keith and Maya, good friends of yours.
Yeah.
I've become acquaintances of them, friends of theirs, but they're your friends that you've known for many years and worked together for years. They came and they talked to us about perseverance in ministry.
Yeah.
And I just think about that connection as well, because in the beginning of Mary's relationship with Jesus, and Martha is having that moment where she's like, Jesus, would you please tell my sister to get up and help me? And he says, in effect, actually, she's chosen something really, really valuable.
Yeah.
And this thing that
The
she's
best thing.
chosen can't be taken from her. And then in the trial of having her brother die, it feels like it could be, she could let go of it. She could lose her relationship with Jesus if she didn't press in that pain. And Keith and Maya are such great testimonies of pressing into Jesus during times of pain.
Yeah.
To persevere.
Yeah. She kept using the word essential.
Yeah.
The essential thing. There's lots of things we could reach for, but she was talking about last night in the midst of trials, whether it's trials in life or trials in ministry, it doesn't matter, but reaching for the essential thing. And that essential thing is this person of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes when all the other stuff is stripped away, things we used to depend on or things that gave us pleasure, gave us power, when those things are missing or taken away, what's that old adage? Sometimes you don't know that Jesus is all you have until Jesus is all you have.
Yeah.
And that's when we reach out, and that's when a lot of people have a moment, right? They have a life-changing moment. How many times have we heard people coming out of them through recovery? They got to that. Hey, when the jail door slammed shut, or when the diagnosis was given, or when she walked out the door, that's when I decided I need to make a change. We have those conversations pretty often.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too, like, I don't know how much time we gave them, but we tried to give them as much time as they needed last night to teach. And I was struck by the things that they said were essential. Like, they're not fancy.
Right. Yeah,
they're not flashy.
Yeah, it's not complicated.
It's not like, oh, you got to get to this spiritual, mystical place of this, and it's you got to confess.
Yeah.
You got to have confession as a part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to
You got to have forgiveness.
memorize a bunch of prayers or
Yeah. It's this really unflashy, challenging pieces of the spiritual disciplines that are that work. They just work. If you don't confess, if you don't work in forgiveness, if you don't do these things, you fail. If you do, it's shocking what you can endure and overcome if you do these simple practices.
Yeah. It's funny. I've had people say to me over the years, doesn't it seem like Christians just go over the same material over and over again? And in a way, that's an observation that's kind of true. I mean, we do. Yeah. But isn't that kind of what we do in life? I mean, we change maybe some of the trappings, but basically, regardless of what the trappings are, what I drive, where I live, what I eat, how much education I do or do not have, we kind of come back to real core life issues that we do over and over again. Yeah. We parent over and over again. Yeah. We stay married over and over again. We hopefully get reconciled with people that we're out of sorts with. We do that over and over again. So that's kind of what life is.
Even the things that people get really excited about that are maybe their hobbies, like we're going to talk about football and we're going to talk about the same thing over and over
Yeah,
again.
yeah, the cycles.
Yeah, offense and defense and
Yeah, that was
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah, but you're excited about this. Like we're talking about eternal things that will
yeah,
not end.
right.
And because they're eternal things, there's a depth to them. Like you can learn something about forgiveness and think, okay, I think I understand forgiveness. And then someone come and offend you, and you're like, oh, maybe I didn't understand forgiveness at all. I've got a
Yeah,
lot more to learn about it. Like grace, there's no end to learning about grace.
yeah,
You don't like graduate from the
yeah,
school of grace and suddenly
yeah,
you understand it and you don't need it anymore. That's
yeah.
not the way it works.
Yeah, when you're on the receiving end of injustice,
Hmm.
all of a sudden you're hyper aware of, hey, that wasn't fair, or that
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
wasn't treated well, or that was the wrong decision. And so you don't just brush that stuff off. But again, it
Yeah.
goes back to those core issues of
Yeah.
everybody wants to be treated justly. Everybody wants to
Hmm.
be needs to be loved. Everybody needs to feel secure. Those are those, we talk about that a lot too. The things that bind us together
Yeah.
the most strongly is we're bound together by our needs,
Yep.
not by our common likes, but by our needs. Hey, it doesn't matter what country you're from, what language you speak. We have a lot in common, even though we may not realize it,
Yeah.
which is our physical needs, spiritual needs, emotional needs. And that's what's beautiful about
Hmm.
humanity and beautiful about the gospel. I mean, because I can go anywhere in the world and I can be very different in food and again the exterior stuff of the way they drive their roads or how they do their architecture, but at its core,
Yeah.
I want to love the person I'm
Hmm.
with. I want my kids to be healthy. I want my family to be whole. I don't want to be in bondage to, some kind of addictions. And it's
Hmm.
crazy how much alike we are.
Yeah. In that conversation around worship too, I think of Keith and Maya as worshipers
Mhm.
and um, that there's a depth of worship that can only come from certain trials and seeing God
Yeah.
come through in ways. There's just a reality that our life experience informs our worship. And when we've seen God come through in hard places and experiences, then it produces a fragrance in our life, a worship in our life that doesn't come any other way.
Yeah.
You
That's
know?
something we threw out that on Sunday. We talked about a little bit briefly. That we were designed by God. If we're
Mhm.
created by God, we were created by God to worship.
Yeah.
And I think for some people might be a little bit of a kind of a,
Hmm.
a, a an interesting fact. Like, really,
Hmm.
I was made to worship. What's up with that? Is
Yeah.
God just some giant ego figure
Egomaniac.
that
Yeah.
he created us all to worship? Like a politician we would
Hmm.
think of like that. But but what if it's we're missing the whole piece of what life looks like, what life is really like according to God, and what relationship with Him
Yeah.
produces, and so forth. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. You've been a worship leader before. You've led worship
Yeah.
before. Um, I I have my own kind of worship story or evolution, I guess I would say in a way,
Mm,
where I started as a kid that worship was a part of my life because it was a part of church and I was a church kid. Like I was brought to church. You sing a couple hymns, which is what we
yeah.
sing, and we sang kind of Southern gospel-y sort of hymns,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll Fly Away and Amazing Grace and that kind of stuff. And I love those songs. But I often felt like as a young kid and then as a younger person growing up, like I don't really get why we like it's weird that we get together and sing. I
Mm,
don't do this with any of my other friends. I don't
mm,
do this in any other activity. I don't get together with my basketball friends and let's sing a little bit before we play.
uh,
Or
in that sense, that's true.
yeah. And I always thought I'm not really sure why we do this. And I always thought as the teaching was the real thing, the real reason we were there. And I
And the
always thought,
worship was just sort of a warm up.
yeah, like why can't we just do that quicker or not do it and go straight to the teaching? And it took a long time before I grew into realizing like, oh no, there's something really important happening here if I'll submit to it.
Yeah, there's a fascinating book out. It's not a Christian book. It's called Your Brain on Music,
Oh.
and what happens to you in the neuroscience of
Hmm.
singing or listening or creating music that's very, very unique.
Hmm.
That doesn't happen in the same way in other activities.
Hmm.
And I think there's just something about it. I watched part of the Super Bowl this last Sunday. It was just this last weekend. And you pan the crowd, and the crowd, for the most part, are very, very engaged in what those 22 men are doing on the field.
Yes,
In
they
fact,
are.
so much so that when they won, the Seahawks won. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen the reruns, but the Seahawks win, and they're giving out the trophies.
Yeah.
And almost every Seahawk guy that got the most valuable player or whatever, they said, I want to recognize the 12th man. And that 12th man are the fans, the ones who are in the stands, screaming and yelling and even singing.
Yeah.
You know,
Where's my ring?
Yeah. And if you've ever been to a professional soccer game or things like that, I think people sing, but in different, obviously, contexts and so forth, and different motivations. Now, I agree. I think sometimes the singing piece of a service, we could go so off on this, but I think it could stand an injection of creativity. I think we get in they're kind of narrow ruts of the style and so forth. And I'll be honest, sometimes even myself, I'm like, there's ways to mix this up. And that's why visiting other cultures is so much fun, because they take the same basic content, but they spice it up, whether that's instrumentally or whether that's presentation or whether that's the use of other tools, something visual.
The contextualized worship of the gospel in that culture. They're going to celebrate the way they're going to celebrate.
I was in a service where they were doing the worship, and there was a giant easel on the stage, and there was this huge sort of a palette, a blank palette, and during the worship, the music piece, a woman got up and started to chalk draw something that was obscure at the beginning. Like, what is she doing? But as I kind of went back and forth, and she was just on the same stage, so your eyes didn't have to go very far. But as she began to bring this drawing into focus, and during the worship and the singing, it was just like this multi-sensory thing. It was just awesome.
Yeah.
And that kind of creativity is just I think that's again the mark of the God image of God on us.
Yeah, I think part of my story is I didn't really get the gospel, and so I was there for information about how to get better.
Yeah.
And to be a better human being. Even as a kid, I was like, I know I'm not good, and I want to get good. I want to be better. And I felt like, I don't think it was conscious at the time, but worship felt like me confessing how not good I was and how good God was, where the teaching felt like, okay, you're going to help me get better so I don't have to keep being such a sinner or a loser or whatever, Yeah. And it took years before the gospel made sense to me, and I realized like, I need Jesus, and he doesn't despise that.
Yeah.
He doesn't despise my need.
Yeah.
He doesn't despise my confession or my repentance, but he loves them.
Yeah.
He hates the sin because of what it's doing to me, but he loves me, and to agree with him is repentance. I'm agreeing with God, and he loves it when I agree with him.
I was thinking as you were talking about, I'm not a neuroscientist and don't pretend to be, but I think we've all read enough to know that our brains are all different, and we're wired different ways. And the whole idea of left brain and right brain, the analytical, the logical versus the creative and the intuitive, and not to put anybody in a box or pigeonhole, but I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
I think, and again, where you see that truth come to light is in cultures, where you've got a culture that's very, very analytical, and would it be left brain? They're super structured.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
And they're line upon line, precept upon precept, where other cultures have to feel what's being said. And so in a message, I think even a message can have those elements where you and I create teaching material all the time. I can here's the example I'm after. I can create a body of information, and here's what I want you all to know.
Yeah.
I want you to know this and this and this, and if you know all these things, you're going to be a better person. But then there's another side of that is like, what do I want you to feel? What do I want you to come away with? What do I want you to apply?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's where you hear someone share a testimony, or like we heard last night, Keith and I sharing stories. And the stories make the information come alive.
Yeah.
And of course, in seminary, they teach you that, you have to have exposition, but then you have to have application, and you have to have this visual, this what was the word? What would that other word be? But this kind of this illustration.
Yeah.
Oh
Right.
yeah, I see what you're. And didn't Jesus operate that way? He talked about, I'm the bread of heaven that comes down from heaven, and he all of a sudden everybody goes away with a pocket full of bread.
A pocket full of bread, a stomach full of bread. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm the resurrection and the life, and Lazarus comes walking out of the tomb. So there was exposition. I'm the resurrection and the life, but then there's this incredible like exploration or explosion, excuse me, of wow, that guy just came out of the grave.
Speaking of talking about things that we don't really know a whole lot about, I find it fascinating to listen to other people that do understand or are trying to understand the difference between the mind and the brain.
Yeah, right.
The brain is the organ that's in my skull, but the mind seems to occupy more than just the space in
my consciousness.
in my skull. Yeah, my consciousness. And what is consciousness?
Well, that's a huge
and they
thing
can't
right now.
answer that question. There's no good answer to that, which is why we have a hard time coming to what is artificial intelligence, because we don't really know what consciousness is. But I say that to say, I think between left brain and right brain, and there's this conversation that I've listened to. Again, I'm no expert on this, about the difference within the church between the East and the West. And you could call it even the Orthodox Church versus the Catholic Church, possibly, or the Orthodox Church versus the Catholic Protestant Church. And the Orthodox Church, my understanding and the way I hear them confess, is that you guys in the West, you try to understand God with your brains. We're just trying to worship him.
Right.
We can't, we know we can't
We want to
understand
be conscious
him.
of him.
And so we worship him through acts of, iconography and worship and lots of different things. And the West says, well, no, he's given us a brain, and so he wants us. It's pleasing to him when we understand him, and that our worship comes from a place of better understanding of him.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm a Western,
Yeah.
Christian, and so it's easier for me to comprehend and understand that side of the faith. But I think even within our own worship services, sometimes we might have that. Or is there a disconnect? Like the brain has been severed between the hemispheres, between the worship and the teaching.
Well, if you've ever been in an Orthodox church, I have, and when you are in there, there's atmosphere.
Yeah, and mystery.
There's candles, and there's vestments, and there's objects on the walls. There's incense.
It's beautiful.
They call in the Catholic tradition, it's a high mass.
Yeah,
a high mass
it's
has all the
senses are being engaged at one time.
And
your
actually,
eyes are
fascinating.
looking,
It's
you're
beautiful.
feeling, you're smelling, you're tasting from the communion. Everything is engaged. Where we tend to be church in a box.
Yeah.
And it's not that
And it's
beautiful to
cerebral.
look at, but the worship sounds nice. We've got that turned in, and we got and then we're going to spend the most of the time on the content.
I think that's why I just had a conversation. Maybe he's listening with a guy, a good friend, and he was talking about this very thing. About he's been a believer most of his life, early 60s, been in church most of his life, and yet he's got this sense of I just feel like there's more. And he was raised in a pretty conservative tradition, and he's visited some places that have more sensory worship, and he's just talking about how it seems like something resonates in his soul.
Yeah, I talked to a young guy that was saying the same thing, that 3 of his friends have converted to an Orthodox faith.
Yeah.
And that they love the ancient piece of it and the mystery of it, because they tend to elevate, there's a mystery we're not going to understand. How can you understand God? He's God.
My
And so
goodness.
there's a mystery to it. And I think that's a fair confession. I don't think they're wrong to
Absolutely.
confess
I think
that.
it's a fair desire.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful, and I'd love to see more beauty injected into it. I don't just mean gilded gold, because frankly, sometimes you see a Protestant. I'll just speak in a stereotype in a way, like a Protestant mega church that's just like, this just looks ridiculous. This looks gaudy.
Yeah.
This doesn't look sacred.
Yeah.
This looks silly.
It could be Broadway. It could be anywhere.
Yeah, the rhinestones on your microphone don't help me glorify God, in some way.
Yeah.
And so there's obviously a line to walk there and what that looks like. But
Yeah. Mysteries. I love my favorite kind of a movie. My favorite genre are the mysteries,
Yeah, they're fun.
like spy movies and like
Hmm.
Who Done It and sort of a thing. But it's wild how, again, you get outside of Western culture and you watch things like just say, well, the movie industry and what their genres, and oftentimes movies not made in the West don't have neat and tidy endings.
Yeah.
They end on mystery,
Yeah.
or they even end on a bad note,
Hmm.
and you're left with this emotion, like, whoa, wait a minute,
Hmm.
because, and again, I think that's changing in the States
Sure.
because of international influence, but isn't that what life is? Life is mystical. Life
Hmm.
should be mystical because my body's on the earth and I have to do what the body needs, and the spirit of God is present, but then there's my soul, which is,
Yeah.
who can delve into that? Who can unpack? Again, I can operate on my brain, but they can't operate on my mind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a bunch of
Yeah.
mystery in there that's beautiful, I think, and it's not an ungodly thing. It's created as we're image bearers.
Solomon's probably an interesting study on this because he was an incredibly intelligent man who then came to the end of intelligence.
Yeah, came
And
to
he's
the end
like,
of his.
I don't know anything.
Yeah.
In a way, he's like, I don't understand. And of course, he had moral failings in his life as well that led to, misunderstandings or misapprehensions about who God is. But I find it fascinating
Yeah.
because I strive to understand. That's my natural bent.
Mhm.
I want to understand. But I think understand sometimes comes from I want to master it.
Yeah, I want to close circle like Solomon. I
Yeah.
want to explore every nook and
Yeah,
cranny.
I feel like if I've understood it, now it's mine. Where there's things I'm not going to understand, and I need to. This is God's wisdom, and I'm just going to submit to it, whether I understand it or
Oh,
not.
my goodness.
And submission and
Yeah.
worship is what we see Mary doing. And then it says the house was filled with the fragrance of that perfume, and I think there's something about that. Like I want our worship, our corporate worship, at Church in the Hill to fill in a certain fragrance profile in our city. I think it's not always just a bad thing that there are a lot of denominations, although there's bad parts about that if it's division and disunity. But I think it can also be beautiful if different parts and expressions of the body of Christ express different. I'd love to be a part of the fragrance profile in the city.
I think this has been one of the weaknesses of the church and the American church for the last 50 years because of advances in science, advances in education and technology, which are all wonderful things. They've benefited the world. But I think there has been a pushing to the margins of anything unexplainable, anything unknowable. And we only, in a sense, bow the knee to what we can know. And that's a sad thing because intellect is certainly a part of who we are, and logic and reason is certainly a part, but there's a whole nother world out there that is mystery, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's a part of who God is, and a part of God yet to be discovered.
I think there is
the Holy
culturally
Spirit.
A longing for transcendence right now, and transcendence I think goes hand in hand with mystery. You don't have transcendence and understand it; it transcends your understanding. So there's going to be mystery in it. I think people are looking for it in odd places like Bigfoot and UFOs and mysticism and magic mushrooms and those places, which are none of them are new things. They're all very old things.
Yeah, LSD is not a new thing.
No, it's not. I think people are searching for something bigger than themselves, and the greatest mystery and transcendent is all right there in Christ.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. We ranged far and wide there in that conversation, but I think it is time to probably wrap it up and go on to our next thing. Yeah, I have life group tonight. You got life group tomorrow night, right?
Yeah. Well, we're actually all together tomorrow night worship.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
at our South Campus at 6:30.
Yeah. When this gets out, it'll already have happened. But yeah, we do worship night every second Wednesday of the month. So come and join us for that. Come be a part of that worship time. And then life groups, you can find those online. There's a wide variety of life groups that you can join. Some of them are going straight through the Bible. Some of them are in the book of John right now. Some of them explore different topics like grief or other things. But if you'd like to find one of those life groups, it's a great place to connect with the body of Christ.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
All right. Thanks, friends.
Keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Keep pushing.
Yeah. Enjoy the mystery. Yeah. We'll see you soon. Bye.